And yeah, it's a long weekend. There's like 5 other events happening, of course, on this day. Well, maybe not literally, but it just feels like it. So I just want to welcome everybody to our the second in our STEM Equity Seminars for Owls series. We've got 3 wonderful speakers with us today. And just as a note and a reminder for folks who've joined us before and for people who haven't, the STEM Equity Seminars for Owls aims to showcase diversity in STEM and highlight work of professionals from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds and identities toward achieving equity in their fields and STEM overall. We aim to include professionals from all disciplines and sectors, including academia, industry, policy, law, medicine, and other professions. So I'd like to welcome our 3 speakers. They're from the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford. It's actually a place I used to work, and so I knew these 3 individuals and knew a little bit about their work engaging faculty and students in service learning and community engaged learning and research. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring them here today, knowing that we have a very, our president has a strong focus and commitment to equity as well as to service leadership, as we call it here. And I know the STEM division in particular is really invested in equity in community engagement as well. So I thought it'd be interesting to hear from the 3 of you the kinds of work that you all are doing at Stanford as a potential, maybe not model, but just like an inspiration for folks who are looking to do more here. So I'm going to just read your short bios and then we shall start. Shoshanah Cohen is the Director of Community Engaged Learning and Engineering. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Industrial Engineering from Stanford, as well as a master's degree in Technology Strategy from Boston University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She started her career working in manufacturing and spent more than 20 years in the field of global operations before moving to academia. Esther Conrad is the Director of Community Engaged Learning for Environmental Sustainability at the Haas Center, and she received her undergraduate degree in Earth Systems at Stanford and has worked on environmental and international development issues for over 15 years. She completed her master's degree in international affairs at Columbia University and her PhD in environmental science, policy and management at UC Berkeley, where her research focused on policies to support sustainable water management and adaptation to climate change. And then third, we've got Jorge De Luna, the Director of Community Engaged Learning in Health, who holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Management and a Master of Public Health degree, both from San Jose State University. Jorge's experience in healthcare spans over 20 years of successful work as a business manager and consultant, program director, and health educator. So what I had asked for the 3 here today was to do a presentation on the work that they do, and then to leave pretty ample time for us to have a discussion together, Q&A, and just kind of hear more about maybe what we're doing at Foothill and the kinds of things that people are interested in finding out more about. So with that, I will remove my spotlight and hand it over to Shoshanah, Esther, and Jorge. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophia. It's really a pleasure to, number one, just still be connected. Sophia was just such an incredible colleague at the Haas Center. It's great to then get connected with all of you. So I hope we'll share a little bit about what we do, but we really hope that we could have some conversation and learn a bit more about what you're doing, and then just have some conversation about how some of the work that we were doing might apply, or I'm sure we're going to learn lessons from you as well. I'm going to share my screen, but I'll share in the presentation. So let me just get started with that. Here we go. Hopefully you can see this. Let me get to the present mode. Hopefully you can see the screen. I think,
all good.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, just getting nice. Okay, good. So anyway, so what we're hoping to discuss today is sort of the core of our work as in our roles at the Haas Center. We are sort of at the interface of creating, alongside faculty and community partners, community engaged learning courses, which is how we call them. We have a term for them at Stanford. Everything at Stanford is like cardinal this, cardinal that. So these are cardinal courses. It sounds like service leadership is sort of some of the way you describe it. But in general, like that's what we're going to discuss about what are some of the key things we do to help create these experiences with a focus on STEM. And I think with regard to equity, we find in creating and implementing these courses, equity is really a big consideration, and it's a big part of sort of the learning outcomes, as well as sort of the other aspects of the other sort of benefit of this is really sort of community benefits. And so we do aim to integrate and consider equity throughout our work, and we'll be highlighting a couple of different ways in which that happens. I will move on. So this is just a very brief overview. So we're going to do, kind of did introductions already, but we'll do a little short warm-up activity just to get ideas flowing. Then we're going to just give an overview of community engaged learning at Stanford and some of the benefits that we have been seeing. We'll talk really specifically about what has been involved for us in developing partnerships between faculty and students and community partners, which are sort of the core of what makes a community engaged learning experience really fruitful for everyone. And that actually will incorporate the tips for faculty. Many of you are faculty, so these are some of the, I think the developing partnerships is sort of our main sort of focus in terms of tips for faculty. And then we'll go through some specific examples of courses that we've helped develop and been part of implementing. And then we'll have a chance for Q&A and discussion. I keep hitting the wrong button to advance. All right, there we go. So just very briefly, as you heard in Sophia's introduction, all three of us are directors of community engaged learning is how we talk about this work. And we have each a specific focus area that we focus our efforts on. So Shoshanah focuses on engineering. My area is environmental sustainability. Jorge is health. Of course, all of these really intersect. So we're constantly working with each other as a team. I want to also mention we have two other directors of community engaged learning focusing on education and on the arts. So really is a sort of a team effort. And then we collaborate with different schools, faculty across the campus to support faculty in various departments and programs in developing courses that are community engaged. So we'll talk a little bit more about what our role is. So now this is a little warm up. This is a little bit of an experiment. Sort of first time I've done this. I'm going to actually stop, just get it out of present mode for a second to share a link with you all. So this is, we wanted to just sort of start, and if we were doing this in person, we'd probably sit in pairs and have this discussion, but this is sort of a way to do it a little differently. So I'm going to post this in the chat. So if you go to this link, right, so the chat, sorry, there we go. Here is the link. If you can go to this, if it's called a Jamboard, that's part of the many different aspects of the Google stuff. And what it offers is just a chance for people to write up in whatever format you like, sort of add a Post-it note. You can draw something, be creative if you feel like it, or just be more like I usually am. I'm just writing a Post-it note and some text on there. What was an inspiring learning experience in STEM for you? And we're gonna just sort of, it's sort of a good starting point when we're thinking about community engaged learning and what are some of the benefits of it. Just thinking about what makes an inspiring learning experience. So I hope that I'm just gonna switch to this. Oh, I see one. We've got a Post-it note. That's excellent. And just we'll just take a few minutes. I'm gonna move them around so we can, yeah, people can see them as they're coming in. Awesome, these are great. Being assigned to determine the speed of sound. Oh yeah, dissecting a frog, very hands-on.
Yeah, frog. I remember that. That was not.
Taking courses from instructors who look like me, and yes, field work in Honduras with medical professionals, wildlife in a California park, teaching middle schoolers biology lessons while I was in college. That's really exciting. These are all so great. Yeah. Senior project as an undergrad. Ooh, taking a cat home to dissect. Oh boy. Okay. Hopefully that was a dead cat. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. This is really cool. Undergraduate research, authentic lab
I would
experience.
like to know more about this cat situation and
Yeah.
where that happened.
The cat was dead. Excellent. Okay. All right. Great. This is really exciting, everybody. These are great. It just, I guess, a theme I'm seeing is that a lot of this is hands-on experience, and this is really, really cool. Yeah. Teacher who's, yeah, these are great. Well, thank you, everybody. These are, oh, we got a couple more. Yeah. Inspiring teachers. Yes, for sure. Yeah. Great. Well, these are all really great, and kind of, yeah, as I mentioned, just seeing a theme there of there being a lot of really hands-on experiences that stick with us over our lifetimes and really influence maybe what we do in our lives. So we definitely find that to be one of the key benefits of community engaged experiences. We're going to skip that slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Jorge, who's going to go take it from here. Do the next section.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. This is really fun to have seen all of the projects that you worked on. One of the projects that I worked on that was really fun was conducting a census of wildlife in the Mendocino coastline. That was so awesome and so much fun. I want to talk to you about the principles of ethical and effective service at Stanford. And why we speak about the principles is because they're really fundamental to our community engaged learning work that we do. They really guide our work with faculty, students, and community partners. And even though they guide the work of all of us, really, these are meant for our students to really take into consideration when they go out and do community engaged learning work. They provide a roadmap, especially to faculty, to consider how a course design can promote ethical and effective service. We want our students to show their best when they go out to the community. And so ethical and effective service are really important. And they are a resource for creating and deepening community partnerships. When we go out into the community to meet a new community partner, we oftentimes talk to them about our principles. And I think that it gives them a lot of context about what preparation our students have when they go out into the community. It is our goal to have all of our students really have read and learned these principles and just aspire to hold them up in high regard when they go out into the community. Finally, the principles serve as a tool to engage students in reflection about their community work. By the way, the principles that we have a set of 8 principles, and I tried to put them here, and they are reciprocity, accountability, respect and inclusion, preparation, humility, evaluation, learning and reflection. Did I miss any? I think I got most of them. But one thing that I want to do to all of you, faculty and students, is invite you to go to our website and read more on the principles of ethical and effective service. We really go into a lot more detail when you go to our website and read up about them. They have been around since 2002. Every so often, we actually review, edit, solicit input from community partners, faculty, students, and staff about what is relevant today, and we revise those principles accordingly. The last time that we revised principles was about 2 years ago in 2019, and they will probably stay this way for a little bit before we change them again. So as I said, the principles really guide the work that we do in the community, and we have developed documents that have questions for the students to reflect on what it means. For example, what does it mean to be humble and show humility when you go into the community? So one way that we think of humility and showing humility is by remembering that actually, even though we're there to provide a service, we're not the experts, but rather we're there to learn as much as we're there to be of service. And so another way of acknowledging humility is by understanding and knowing that the communities that we serve is not all about deficits, but they actually have a lot of assets to offer to us as well. So reciprocity, I don't know if I mentioned reciprocity, it's really, really one of our key principles. And what it means is really that in our community engaged learning relationships, we really want our relationships to be reciprocal, where everyone involved benefits. And we believe that in community engaged learning, the student benefits, the faculty or lecturers benefit, and the community partners benefit. It doesn't mean that it's equal benefit, but it is equitable benefit. So I really encourage you to read about the principles of ethical and effective service. And for lecturers, you're always welcome to adapt them to fit your needs and to take what you like about them or from them. They're really on our website open for other institutions to use in the way that is appropriate for them. And also, by the way, we offer workshops on the principles of ethical and effective service to our lecturers. And if you ever were interested in that, we would be happy to do that for you as well. Next slide, please. So the cardinal courses apply classroom knowledge to real-world societal problems, and you're going to see that more effectively when we go over our examples. But we consider cardinal courses to be courses that engage with the community to address societal need. We definitely want the course objectives to reflect in the community-based experiences. The way I like to say that is, whatever we're learning in the classroom, we put into practice in the field, and they support it. There's learning that happens in both places. And I spoke about reciprocity. Our courses should be beneficial for students, faculty, and community partners, and provide an opportunity to examine public issues, so many public issues that we are all concerned about. And our cardinal courses, we require them to embody the Stanford principles of ethical and effective service, which I just spoke about. So that's what we consider a cardinal course. Next slide. How do we support our students and our faculty? We help plan, we identify the relevant community partners, assist with student placements, and clarify the roles and expectations, which is really, really important whenever you engage with a community partner. So the way it looks, oftentimes a faculty or a lecturer contacts us and says, Jorge, I have this idea for a class. I would like to have a community engaged learning component, but I don't know where to go. And after talking to them for a little bit, I might suggest a community partner. I may just, connect them. But oftentimes what I do personally is I meet with the community partner and tell them a little bit about the class that the faculty is interested in creating. And then we take it from there. We help design the curriculum part that has to do with the community engaged learning piece. We consult with the faculty on that issue. We prepare our students for the community experience in several ways through courses, workshops. We also sometimes designate students to be community engaged learning coordinators. So one student will be, in essence, helping other students to follow, to do the work logistically. For example, getting there on time on a certain date, knowing where to be. A lot of our courses also prepare students to have some basic skills to do whatever service or project they're conducting in the community. And we also help with implementing student reflection. The way we sustain these courses, we really like to stay in touch with our community partners and measure the impact of these courses. We conduct mid-quarter feedback evaluations with the students to tell us, how did this course go? What did you like about it? What would you change? And what can you as a student do to make these courses better? And then also as directors of community engaged learning, we really, we maintain our community partnerships because our students come and go. They're there at the most, for 4 years, and they're there 1, 2, or 3 quarters for that class. But so we are tasked with maintaining our community partnerships. That's how we support our faculty and our students. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what are the benefits of community engaged learning? I think that there's so many. One thing that comes to mind to me very clearly is that students and faculty oftentimes want to make an impact in the world and in the community with what they're learning or what they're teaching. It's motivating to work on projects that benefit other people. That's a big benefit that we see from community engaged learning. This is a great opportunity for our students to develop soft skills, skills that they're not necessarily learning in the classroom, about relationship building with community partners and with members of the community. And we really get a chance to connect with multiple organizations. The students get to connect with organizations that may become their employers, or they may have internships for them. So the cardinal courses or community engaged learning are often a springboard for students to jump into their profession or their career of choice. Yeah, and then, the classroom lectures can sometimes be very abstract, but putting them into practice in the field really brings the learning together for the students. We find that very, very often. So in essence, the classroom really becomes life when you are doing community engaged learning. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass this on to Shoshanah, who's going to speak to you about developing partnerships.
Oh, next page. Okay. This is a question we get asked quite a bit. And I think anyone who teaches a class that's got a service component probably gets asked this quite a bit, is how do you get the partners and the projects that are going to give your students a great experience? And I would say in our roles, this is probably the most difficult part of our job, because I don't know if Footill's on quarters or semesters, but we're on quarters. And that means we have 10 weeks per quarter, which means we need to find projects and partners that start when our quarter is starting. So it could be early January, say, go for exactly 10 weeks, then end neatly at the end of the quarter and have a meaningful project. So this is not easy. And this is something that we spent quite a bit of time working on. So I want to talk a little bit about how we find the partners. First of all, we try to keep track of projects that have been done by other students in other classes. And I'm going to talk when we give some examples about how we do this in a class that I teach. But those are some good potential points of contact. And there are also good ways of understanding the type of projects that students are capable of doing. We all have networks, regardless of whether we've been teaching this way a long time or not very long, but certainly reaching out to your own network and asking them if they have contacts. I have even done things like put a project opportunity on Nextdoor to see if anyone in my neighborhood or surrounding neighborhoods might be interested or have a good opportunity. You have likely done service in the past, so you can use your own previous volunteer experiences. Contacting alumni, we obviously have a lot of tools to keep in touch with alumni, because that's how Stanford gets lots of money. But most schools have lists of alumni, and they generally graduate and go on to some jobs, and they might have opportunities at the place where they're working. And we're starting this right now. You'd think that this would be something we'd had all along, but we're starting a database of community members who ask for help on projects that work well with service-based classes. And this is a little bit different than keeping a database of community members who ask for help in general, because we also get that. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is really more, well, this is for you and students. I know we have, I think, a little bit of both on this call. Really understanding the organization before you even start contacting them is important. And I am always surprised when students immediately go out to talking to an organization without spending some time understanding what they do. So what is their purpose? What is their mission? How big are they? What kind of budget do they have? And that will give you a good idea of the types of projects that they might have available to students. Obviously, you can use the website to find out who you should contact that. And this is one of the things that it's, again, hard for us to, it's challenging to get students to not do this. When you have a class and a student that has spent some time gaining particular skills, they want to use them. And sometimes they are a nail looking for a hammer. So they know what they want to do, and therefore they want to find a project that fits with that thing. And sometimes that is not really what the partner wants. So we really want to spend some time understanding what they need and starting with that. And it's okay to respond with how technology or something STEM-like can help with that, but we don't want to lead with that. Next page. Okay, I'm going to give some examples in a second, but that picture is actually from a class that I have been working with this quarter. We want to describe what we can do for the partner. And again, this needs to be in the context of the class and the learning objectives. As Jorge mentioned, we always want the project to advance the learning objectives for the class, so the student can't complete all the learning objectives without doing the project. But we also want the project to leverage what the students know how to do. So summarizing what the class is all about, what resources you can bring to bear, what knowledge or experience you and students might have, understanding the time you're prepared to commit. This can be fraught with peril, where sometimes you have a partner that has, I'd say, unreasonable expectations, and sometimes you have students that have unreasonable expectations. We're going to talk about in a second about, usually they have to do with communication and giving data back and forth. It's helpful to give them some examples of other projects, what your students have completed, what impact it had, and if you're doing something that's building a technology, explaining how that happens. Okay. All right, being responsive to replies. This usually applies more to students than faculty, but college students have complicated lives. There is no doubt about that. And they have many other obligations in their lives. And as a result, they might have a very small amount of time to actually focus on the communication back and forth. But so do community partners. And it's important to understand that you're not always going to get a reply when you want it. You might have to wait. On the other hand, when an organization reaches out to you or responds to you, we want to respond right away. Again, this is something we really have to work with students on. Lecturers and staff that are teaching they know this, but we want to kind of get back to the partner within 24 to 48 hours and be very patient waiting for them to respond. They have very busy lives as well, and they might be fighting a fire that you don't know about. Next, yeah. Okay, there's a lot of words on this page, so I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but the point here is you want to, before you start the project, have a really unambiguous description of what it is you're going to be doing. And this can actually take quite a long time. I've gone through 6, 7, 8 renditions of a project brief before we're satisfied with it. And again, in our context, the project is going to be completed in 10 weeks and sometimes 20 weeks if it's a longer course, but it always has to fit within that time frame, and that can be tricky. We want to understand, what's the project going to do? Why does the community partner need it? What problem are you solving? In this case, we're talking about STEM-based projects. So there might be a technology out there that does something similar, but if it's not what they need, we want to understand why that is. It could be the functionality isn't there, or it could be there's something out there that's just too expensive even though it works. So have a good understanding of the prior work. And then obviously we need to have a point of contact. And ideally you have one point of contact or a chief point of contact that we consider the project liaison. We don't want 15 students calling that person, but we also don't want them to have 25 people at the partner that might be on the receiving end of their communications. So we want to have one point of contact. Okay. I'm going to actually hand this back over to Esther. That was a good description of how you want your side to be prepared for this. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we get the partner ready.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, with respect to helping partners sort of get prepared for working with a class, and as Shoshanah has mentioned, we're talking about these mostly 10-week quarters. We do have some courses that work with the same partner that they're actually even all academic year, and they build up a project and work on it over multiple quarters. So that always helps things. But in general, so there's as it's shared here, sort of sharing the syllabus and really highlighting sort of, okay, what are the students, what is sort of the overall learning goal of the course, and how does the project that is being proposed fit in with the course. And that can vary a lot. So we have some courses where the project essentially is the whole focus of the course. And so the project really itself is say teaching students certain skills, or they're getting a chance to practice certain skills that are sort of the main focus of the course. Other classes are it's an additional component, and not the only way that they're achieving the learning goals. So explaining responsibilities. So often what I'm doing is really before a course begins, having a conversation with the partners about, okay, so in this course, you might expect to meet with a student team a certain number of times and give them feedback on what they're doing. And even before that, of course, I've worked with the partner to really define what the students would be working on. So we would hopefully come to that decision together about exactly what their role and responsibilities would be. Sometimes we partners actually give lectures in classes. That's sort of a model that we have some courses, especially in education, but also in other areas, which are sort of co-learning, where the partners are really involved as instructors, and they're also the students are sort of learning alongside their partners. So that's a potential role. And then there's also sort of a final presentation. So how are we going to share the results? So our partner is going to participate in a final series of final presentations. In this virtual world, we've moved a lot of them, basically we've been operating completely remotely. So it might mean for a partner, it might mean showing up on a Zoom call for the last class where students are sharing their work, or students might actually come to the partner's meeting, for example, to share what they've done. So it's really, those are some of the kinds of responsibilities. And we try to sort of agree on, have a mutual agreement, so the partner isn't surprised at request of, hey, can you review the student, project draft and draft report? And there's, despite all the best attempts at communication, because everybody's so busy, some things often do get lost in the shuffle and have to course correct. So discussing time constraints, and this is a really tough one. Like I have a class that's only a two unit class, which in our world means like 3 hours per unit outside of class time. So students are only putting in about, when it comes down to the project itself, really only about 5 hours a week, or a little less. And it's often hard for partners, or can be very excited about how much the students can do and getting them involved in introducing them to different dimensions of their work. And that's all really wonderful, except that the students are not necessarily going to be able to follow through if the project sort of expands to beyond a certain scope. And so that's one thing to be really clear about. And then understanding the students. So we have classes that students have very different backgrounds. And that's something that it's important to help partners know ahead of time what are the specific skills a student brings, so they can know what kinds of projects. That seems like something you could figure out ahead of time, but sometimes not. Like I have a class that actually has both master students in environmental science and master students in environmental communications, and they're in the same class. We have a process at the beginning of that class where students rank the projects that interest them most. And, sometimes the students are really interested in a project, but are not necessarily bringing the exact skills that the partner was expecting. So you might still match them up, but you might have to adjust expectations in that regard. So that's preparing the partners. Very briefly, preparing yourself. So this is really, if you're engaging really with a partner on trying to accomplish something together, really understanding where the partner is coming from is really, really helpful and really important. So you can, of course, read about their work online, watch, everything being recorded these days, watch past events that, and this is all stuff that you can also ask students to do as well. Sort of read reports and watch material online, and also attend meetings. I've certainly found that very helpful myself to say, for example, we had a course last quarter where we had some students doing some research related to a regulatory process around air quality in Stockton. And just the community members were having regular meetings online with the air district where community was sharing their concerns. And that was a very great way for me and also for the students, by just attending a meeting, to understand what are some of the more complicated dimensions of the whole, process. Where would their research be fitting in this larger picture? Asking questions, of course, about things we don't understand, and reflecting on our own positionality. We are there are many different ways and directions that this can happen, but you can have students coming from your in the case of Stanford, an institution that's sort of viewed as has potentially a reputation for having come in and done research over the years that maybe hasn't generated benefits for communities. So, or people coming from backgrounds where they're not really grounded in sort of like, what's it like to live in a community that is coping with air pollution that impacts your health on a daily basis. At the same time, we actually do have students who come from those communities. So there is also a way in which students themselves may feel a connection with a community at a level that we, that might be really important for a community partner to, like help develop that relationship where there's some shared experience there. Or you might have a student who comes from a community where they've experienced, say, severe air pollution problems, but they're working in a community that has not experienced those problems. So it can go all different directions, but it's important to think about, again, we're sort of going back to the principles of ethical and effective service that Jorge highlighted before. Important to just think about those things. So I think this is just kind of like a quick summary slide of the process, sort of your identifying partners, initiating dialogue about working together, communicate about expectations, building trust. Really, that can look a lot of different ways, but it could be helping out in a small way on a certain project that maybe isn't related to the course, or sharing contacts that might be useful for the partner in other contexts, for example. Sharing project outcomes, that's absolutely critical. Paving the way for others. We're going to share some examples of, really looking at a 10-week quarter as just one of many opportunities to build a relationship over time with partners to, have a student start working on a particular project, and then another team of students can come in and take up where they left off. And then just never underestimating the amount of time that all of this preparation really can take. It's always great to start early if possible. So let me pass it off to Shoshanah for talking about our first set of examples.
Yeah, thank you. This example I'm giving you is from our mechanical engineering program, and this is actually our senior capstone class. So every senior mechanical engineering student takes this class called Integrating Context with Engineering. And I should mention, this is actually a 20-week class. And there is absolutely no way we could get through all of the things that the students are doing in a 10-week quarter. Generally, it is in the fall and in the winter, because as you probably expect, a senior in their spring quarter of their senior, it's just, there's definitely senioritis happening, and we can see it in the project. So this year we had to switch to winter spring because of the pandemic and some changes we had to make to the class. But next year we're going back to autumn, winter, thank goodness. All right, speaking of COVID and working remotely, as Esther mentioned before, we had to shift all of our classes completely online last spring. And it's only in the very, very recent weeks that we've been able to have students on campus or in labs working on things, with their actual hands in the project. So this example I'm going to give for this year is students were working remotely the whole time until just a few weeks ago. So in this class, students work in teams of 4, and that was even more complicated this year because we could have 4 people in 4 corners of the world. They work in teams of 4 and they address a real world problem. And the theme of the class can change a little bit from year to year, but we look at things like environmental sustainability, pollution reduction. We look at food inequities in the world. We're trying to cover big social problems. What we don't do in this class is work with a big corporation to fix the thing that they're building to make it more profitable for them. So that's not part of this class. We do have classes that do that. Our community partners can be anything from a medical lab that's working on something that has a mechanical engineering angle to it, to farms, which is what I'm going to actually talk about in a second, and farming cooperatives. We do work with corporations, but on the kind of social impact part of a corporation. So for example, we have done projects with Amazon. We just did one that was looking at how do you take an Amazon box, which you've all gotten the Amazon boxes, and they have a lot of air in them and a lot of plastic and a lot of space. How do you create a package where it just fits around the product? So the package is really just the product plus a little bit on the outside. And what does that do for the world if you are using less packaging that way? So that would be an example of a project for a company. We also work with rural communities. For example, we did a project with a very small community in Alaska, working on creating a way for them to grow food in this incredibly remote and very cold environment. And we also do projects with faculty and research institutes. So we try to advance some of the research that is being done at some labs at Stanford and sometimes actually at other universities. So the Alaska project I just mentioned was actually done with the University of Alaska. Okay, and then the students, what they produce is a tested prototype and product documentation so that the partner can take it forward and a plan for future work. So the students are building a physical thing that they can show then to the partner and to the rest of the class at the end of it. The photos here, in case you're wondering what that is, our students can have lots of fun with this, and sometimes they do. So the team there, the name of the team that they picked for themselves was the Red Dried Chili Peppers, which you'll understand in a second. And every time they gave a presentation in the class, they posed as one of the Red Hot Chili Pepper album covers. By the end of the course, we had some fabulous photos. This is just one example. We got very creative. Okay, next page. One of the things I have found really, really helpful in this class, because again, this is a class I'm deeply involved in, is to take a project students worked on one year and bring it forward, advance it. It can be over the summer and also into the next year. And I'm just going to walk you through a short history of what we call the chili sequence. I just mentioned chili peppers. These projects are being done in cooperation with a farming cooperative in India that works with smallholder farmers, many of whom, actually most of whom, are not really paid a fair amount for the crops that they grow. There is tremendous inequity in the food system in India, and also tremendous food loss as a result of products being damaged as they're being produced. So in this case, the teams are focusing on red chilies. Red chilies are a major India export. There are many, many tiny chili farmers in India. And when they have finished growing their crops, they pick them and they dry them. And that's how obviously that's how you end up with dried chili peppers. And the way it's usually done is you just spread them on the ground. And they sit on the ground for somewhere between 20 and 28 days. And as you can imagine, a lot of bad things can happen in that time, like rain, like fungus, like lots of things. So the faster you can dry them, the better. And these projects started with a big focus on how do you dry chilies faster. So in the first year, the students built a thermal storage-based greenhouse that would capture heat during the day and then release it at night. So you could put the chilies in this greenhouse, and the sun obviously wasn't shining at night, but they stayed hot. And they took the amount of time to dry the chilies from 20 to 28 days down to more like 8 to 10, which was a big thing. But they did this on a very small scale, and they did it on the Stanford campus. So over the summer after the first year, we had a graduate student and then took that and built out a greenhouse at scale in India. And we are working with a foundation there, and they had some engineers that work with our students. We built out this greenhouse. The next year, we had some students work on optimizing the airflow inside the greenhouse so that you could improve the drying process even further. And they did this whole system of racks perfectly spaced to optimize the airflow, and they figured out where to put fans and where to put entry and exit to the greenhouse so that the chilies would stay as warm as possible. So that was the second year. And then also when you dry chilies, as you would expect, they release water, and that's a scarce resource in this area of India. So we had students that worked on a system to recapture that water and turn it into clean water that could be used for drinking. Then we did some structural improvements over the next summer. And then the third year, as I just mentioned, students had built a racking system, and they devised a way to take that water from the thermal storage system and run it through the racks and use the rack then in the off season when you're not drying chilies to grow seedlings. And they use the water to irrigate the seedlings. It was very cool. And then we had another set of students that worked on a light box where you could put products like chilies into this light box and take a photo and use AI, which was done by a different team, not mechanical engineering students, to assess the quality of the chili. And that meant farmers could have a kind of unambiguous assessment of the quality of their crops. Year 3, that was last summer. And so as you would expect, this was all done remotely. We had students working on more thermal analysis, mapping out the supply chain, and then looking at a blanching process, because it turns out if you flash blanch a chili before you put it into drying, you melt off this waxy outer coating and it dries faster. So we had a group of students, some of the pictures you saw earlier with all the water happening, that was the blanching project that the students worked on this year. And they also worked on insulation for the greenhouse in India so that you can retract the top, allow more sun to come in when the sun is shining, and then close it back up at night or when you need to have insulation. So these projects have been great. And one thing I would say is the second year, the students were kind of like, well, we don't really want to do this because other students had done it before and we don't want to do their project again, which is expected. But we've had a way to just keep building on the work that the students are doing, and they've been excited to do it. One thing we have at Stanford is we have the Stanford Educational Farm, which is a marvelous place. And it's a good place, as you would imagine, to do agricultural projects. In the past, I think 6 weeks or so, we've actually had students be able to go on campus to the farm and build those things out. That's why I was able to capture some pictures of those projects. So happy to answer any questions about this. You can tell I'm very passionate about the chili supply chain and really excited about the work the students are doing. Okay, and Esther's going to talk about some of her classes.
Yeah, I'll just go very briefly over two examples. So one is a soil science class, which is works much more locally than the chili the chili project, but essentially it's just a soil science class. They're trying to help students understand the physical and chemical biological processes in soils, and so there's a lot of course content that they get that actually is just kind of regular lecture time. But their final project is a project that's designed in collaboration with a partner, namely farms and community gardens. The example shown here is with something called the Green Beginnings Garden, which is actually in back of a home for run by Kainos Training Center in Redwood City. So it's a group home that this nonprofit group called the Incredible Edible Peninsula helps to maintain. That's just kind of like a fruit and vegetable garden in back of this group home. And so the students essentially for each of the partners, and they also work with farms like Pie Ranch and Tomcat Ranch and others. They dig a soil pit, they take soil samples, and then they take it back to the lab, analyze the soil data, and then they develop a management plan for a specific challenge that their partner has identified. So in this case, the partner was considering, what do we do with this sort of blank area in the garden where they were thinking about planting a citrus tree. So the students were trying to say, like, okay, how good is the soil for the citrus tree? And if you were to plant citrus, what would you need to do to the soil to amend it? And also taking into consideration, this isn't a nonprofit group that's really, promoting organic agriculture. So they're, taking into account like what kinds of options their partner would actually want to consider doing with the soil. So taking all of that into account, they develop kind of a management plan, and that is the deliverable for the partners. So this has been a really exciting course that has been taught for five plus years as a community engaged course. We had to adapt it. Now this is the second year in a row that we've adapted it to be virtual, which was pretty challenging because the students couldn't go out there to do soil sampling, obviously. So we actually had them, last year we had them do new challenges on old soil data, little less valuable for the partner, but it kind of worked like 1 year after the soil data was collected. This year, the second time we had to teach it, that just wasn't going to be that valuable, like using the same soil data like a second year in a row. So we actually had the partners, and we provided them some financial support to do this, take soil samples and mail them to us. So that, and then students worked on challenges and had Zoom meetings with the partners. So hopefully this one will go back to being in person next year. This other one, this is actually a professional development class, and it's the one that I mentioned earlier that includes master's students in environmental science as well as environmental communications. And so it's a required class of everybody in this master's program. And so we actually, in this class, we probably it's taught 2 times a year, every quarter. So each time we have probably 5 or 6 partners and teams of students that are probably about 2 to 3 students each. Some of them are very communications oriented. Some of them are a little more ecology related. So a couple of examples from the ecology end of things. So there have been numerous collaborations with grassroots ecology. So for example, a team of students took data that grassroots ecology had through its own kind of citizen science efforts that had been collected, but not really analyzed much through the different creeks around the area. And so the students just kind of sorted through the data and tried to look for trends and say, for example, pH in San Francisco Creek to help, explore what are some of the insights they can gain from that in terms of managing and restoring ecosystems. And then another example is more education related, is with Actera. They were developing a climate change education curriculum with the Ravenswood School District, which is in Menlo Park, and really wanted to focus on food and what students could do. Sort of education about climate change and the link with food, and then help students figure out like what actions they could take. And so 1 quarter, a team of students sort of worked on curriculum development for this. And then the next quarter, a team of students worked on like an action guide that students could take home and work with their families and talk, at home, what are some of the actions they could take at home. And then the pandemic hit. And so we actually had it didn't work out with the class, but we had a connection with the student organization and students in the Students for Sustainable Stanford, which is an organization at Stanford that does a lot of sustainability work. They took on the task of converting some of the lessons that the students in the class had created to a Google Classroom. And so that's what's actually online right now. And so those were the deliverables. So that's, just another example. I'll pass it to Jorge, who can talk about a couple of health examples.
Yeah, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just telling you about 2 really great classes that actually were the result of COVID-19. in the beginning when COVID hit, we actually thought that we wouldn't be able to hold our classes. We didn't really know that so much would transition to virtual teaching and learning. But that's what ended up happening. And one of the things that I noticed was that our students were really anxious to help out in some way or another. So one way that, and one opportunity that came about was with bridging the telehealth divide for patients at community clinics. And so what this project was, it was really a service project for the students who took this class and learned the medical record systems and other forms of media like Zoom and I don't know which others, to help patients who were not able to see their doctors in person, to help them have consults via the internet using the technology that we have now at our disposal. So that was a really great class. But I have to say, there were some challenges that had existed for many, many years. So an opportunity came up with COVID, and that is that in the past, physicians were not allowed to see, or actually they were allowed, but they were not allowed to charge for office visits in a clinic if the person was not there in person. Now, the COVID-19 crisis nationwide and worldwide really necessitated some things to change. And this is one of the things that changed. Doctors were actually able to see patients from their homes, from their office, and actually charge for it. So that was kind of a nice silver lining to the epidemic. This has, by the way, I'm sure changed forever. And it's not necessarily for the benefit of the physicians, but actually for the clinics where they work. They're the ones that are collecting the revenue. So this was a great class. The other class that we worked on, if you can go to the next slide, it's also related to COVID. And what it was actually to train our students to become contact tracers for the County of Santa Clara and their contracted agency, which is called De Luna Health. And that's the contractor for Santa Clara County Public Health Department to do contact tracing. They trained our students to contact individuals who had been found to have COVID or who have been potentially exposed to COVID. And they encourage them to seek medical care, to contact the people that they have been in touch with and let them know that they could potentially be infected with COVID, etc. So this was a very necessary, a very needed resource at the time. And our students really wanted to do the work. And we were fortunate to have faculty who also wanted to help in some way. There's many other health issues that are, of course, as you know, that many other health courses that we have that are not related to COVID that also continued in one way or another. But this was an opportunity for our students to do something and respond to the pandemic in a very impactful way. I think that's it.
Yeah, so why don't I stop sharing so we can see each other.
And maybe I'll remove spotlights and we can just have a gallery view for people if they want to come on and ask questions. Thank you three so much. It's you know, I mentioned before that I worked with the three of you for a couple of years, and just our work didn't necessarily intersect. So it's great to see the examples that I didn't know so much about. Really amazing things happening. I'd like to open the floor for folks who have questions. I know I have a few questions prepared if people don't, and Christina might too. So yeah, any questions from anybody who might be interested? Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much for the talk. Really appreciate it. So Esther, you mentioned, one of the things that you listed was start early. So how early? A month, 2 months, a year?
And Jeff, maybe you can introduce yourself just so our guests know who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the astronomy professor here at Foothill College.
Terrific to meet you, Jeff. Yeah, no, and that is a really great question. And actually, we could probably each comment on this, on how, how early we think is early. So it's like it is a little context dependent. But one class that it's early was like a year before the class was started, right? So that was like when I was planning a class and we were starting from scratch with developing a partnership in the community of Bayview Hunters Point, a community that has long experienced pretty severe environmental racism, and building trust was just a really important thing. Like, you just couldn't go in there and say, hey, we've got this class, can you just jump on board? It was really about what does the community need, and would this class be valuable at all, or do we need to find some other way we could support? And so, but I had a faculty member who was really committed to it, and so we just had a series of meetings, and we started in, maybe it wasn't quite a year. So we started in May of 2019, and she taught the course in winter of 2020. So in January through March of the following year. So that was, I was glad we started when we did, but it was early enough to get it done. But there's other times where we don't actually need as much lead time. So for example, this summer, I'm working to figure out partners for fall classes. Some of those are like, I'm going back to partners who I've already connected with. I don't know if Jorge and Shoshanah, you want to talk about your experiences with that?
Yeah, I say, I'm working right now on a class that we have been planning. It's going to be a year in fall when we teach the class. So not to say that has to be the case. For example, the 2 COVID classes that were developed, they were developed within probably 2 or 3 months at the most. And were they perfect? Probably not. And let me tell you one thing that we encountered, for example, was that when our students and our faculty were ready to go into the field, so to speak, there were some HIPAA issues on the clinical side that had to be taken care of. And so sometimes you can't really, you don't think about these things until you're in it. It took longer than we wish it would have to clear the students to be able to access HIPAA information for the patients. And so, but it happened in 3 months.
Yeah, we have similar issues sometimes when we have students who are working with minors, because the organization you're working with, they all have, you have to get a clearance from each of them separately. It's not like that you can get a national, yes, we did a background check on Jeff and he's good to go with all of these organizations. Sophia knows this really well because she worked with lots of minors. And again, it can happen quickly, but we don't want the instructor to get to the point where they're trying to start the class, they have students, and we say, no, you have to go do background checks on everybody. Especially right now, because they're taking longer, because there's a lot of mailing things around and such.
Yeah, I was just recently asked by someone who is interested in starting a class. They said, well, if you want to start a class in fall, would it be, can we start in July? And I'm like, if we can, I don't recommend it. So what I said actually was that it's helpful to have, for us, we talk about quarters. I would say 2 or 3 quarters at the very least. There's a lot of work involved, especially if this is a new class, because you are developing the curriculum and the materials that go with the class along.
I will also say, though, sometimes we do things super quickly. That the class is starting and the instructor needs partners, and we will just do something fast.
I'm at some point, if there's a time for this, I would just love to hear if you have specific ideas in terms of astronomy and the partnerships that you might envision. And anyway, if you had something in mind, it'd be cool to chat about it. It's neat.
Yeah, Jeff, if you don't mind. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so ironically, one of the things I was going to ask was like, do y'all have like a brainstorming process or something to help you generate some process that you figured out to kind of help you go through that process of looking at what are the things that I'm already teaching, or what are the things that I am competent to teach, and then trying to find ways to match, to visualize what community needs might be. Because I gotta say, when I think about like, I don't know, the death of stars, I'm kind of hard pressed to think about how somebody needs that, out in their neighborhood.
We have a big stock too of graduate students who are doing research, which is helpful. But this year, here's an example. A professor approached me who teaches music. And let me tell you, my music experience is like actually less than that. I mean, not my thing at all. And he was teaching a class on the history of Black music in the US. Really. Anyway, it turned out we had a student that was working with someone else who was studying, he's not studying music per se, but he was actually working with the Museum of, I can't remember, I'm not going to get the name quite right, but the Museum of African American History that's associated with the Oakland Public Library. And he was doing a project on music archives. So we connected them that way. Didn't see that one coming, but it worked out really well.
Yeah. In terms of, I guess just an immediate thought that comes to mind in terms of the connection is really education one, right? So, like that's a topic that many students may not have the opportunity to get exposed to, and that's just super, super exciting, and a real way that, then the challenge is like, how does it connect with the learning goals of a course that you're teaching? So maybe is there a learning goal of a course that would relate to being able to describe these concepts to people who are not familiar with them, or a certain age range, or so that could be incorporated potentially as a learning goal of the course. And then the service aspect would be interacting with students, or maybe developing a lesson plan. So that's just an idea that came to mind when you mentioned your topic. But in terms of brainstorming, it's like, I think I have conversations with faculty and instructors to say, what are they teaching? What are their past experiences? And seeing how their work has been applied, or where do they think their work could potentially be applied? And just think, and then also I often share with them some examples of, even if it's not directly related to their topic, like examples of how the projects have played out in another class, like how those projects have been designed. And sometimes that sparks an idea. So it's really just kind of in conversation. And then I would maybe meet with a faculty and then think, okay, that nothing's really coming to mind, but let me, have that in the back of my mind when I'm meeting with a bunch of partners. And then I go meet with them and I said, oh my gosh, yes, this faculty member is doing that, and making the connection, but it's a little unpredictable. But
and I'll just offer, Jeff, I know, I think part of what's cool about what the three folks here do is they've got this, like, their specific role is that intermediary between community partner and faculty, and they're kind of collecting both pieces of that. And as a faculty, for you, Jeff, if you've got ideas on one side, feel free to reach out to me, because I've got some of that partnering already in progress. And having come from the Haas Center, I think some of that is already in my mind. So I'd be happy to do some brainstorming with you if that's of interest. And for anybody else in the room, I think we know that the college, there is an emphasis on service leadership. And I think often STEM doesn't get thought about in that context, because it's a little bit harder sometimes to wrap people's head around that. So I think these are just some really cool examples of where you can take the science into practice and make for really cool experiences for the students. Cool. Other questions that people have? Christine, I don't know if you want to jump in with any questions, or if anybody else has questions.
I have a couple, but I figure I'll just give it a pause in case anybody else wanted to ask anything.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I don't want to monopolize your time, but I wrote a lot of questions as we went along. So, a couple of times you sort of hit on this idea. I forget which one of you hit on this idea of kind of project selection. And I was wondering if I could ask you to say a little bit more about how that process could work. Because one of you was mentioning, like, you might have some students who have some skills that are kind of relevant to the project, another set of skills, but sometimes you might be missing some of those skills. How do you even do that identification? Is it like student self-assessments, or is it interviews with the students? How do you figure out who has the baseline to actually start proceeding on one of these?
So I would say all of the above. So in the mechanical engineering class I was talking about, mechanical engineering students, they focus in different areas. It could be product realization, it could be mechatronics, it could be fluids, it could be thermo. And you don't want to have a bunch of thermo students working on a robot kind of thing.
Right.
So we do ask the students to tell us, we know what their depth of concentration is, but we ask them to tell us what they're good at. We also have them do a self-assessment, which is designed to tease out, you don't want to have a team of 4 where everyone wants to be the team leader. You don't want to have a team of 4 where no one wants to be the team leader. And some students, they're all comfortable doing different things. So we spend a lot of time crafting the teams, and we also let them choose the project. Having said that, I've been to sessions like from our Center for Teaching and Learning, where the question is, do you let the students pick their own team, or do you assign the team? In some classes, let the students pick, and some classes assign. This class, we assign the teams, and they have to get along. That's part of the class, is learning how. You don't go out to work and say, I don't want to work with that person. It doesn't work that way. So they're getting that experience. But some classes they do choose. And we will turn projects, I'll definitely turn projects down where I don't think we have the capability to do it. And we turn projects down where it's not really a good learning experience for the student. So as another example, computer science for Stanford is part of engineering. And I get all the time questions from organizations that want to have students build an app or build a website, and we don't do those. And part of that is, as you I'm sure all know, by the time your website is done, it's out of date. You have to maintain it. And we don't want a situation where the student's like, here you go, here's your deliverable, and then they can't use it, or they can't ever update it.
Yeah, I say that there are even some classes where students can only enroll by application. And so in those cases, some students are, they need to have certain skills or knowledge before they can participate in those classes. But also you can base it on what you're going to teach in your class. If the skills that you're going to, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you will be teaching in your class prepare students to do certain work in the community, then you know that they're going to be capable of doing that.
Yeah, does that help, Jeff?
Yes, thank you. And also just throwing in one little comment here. I have a long list of astronomy education simulations that I've been working on, implementing with one of the computer science profs here, and so if you ever change your mind about the web apps thing.
So I'm talking about like build an app that I can put out there and have people use my app for my services. But actually, if you have a project that is going to require some serious computer science skills to build, that could absolutely be something that we look at. But building up a website with Squarespace is not really, doesn't count.
Just to put in a plug, Jeff is awesome. So if anybody wants to work with him.
I'm definitely looking for CS projects. So.
Oh. We have time for probably one more question. Anybody in the audience want to? Christina, why don't you go for it?
I have a couple of questions. Yeah, I'm just curious about, I guess the level. So as you know, we're a community college. And for example, I personally teach an introductory level course. So I'm just curious, so the courses that you are all developing, I forget the term that cardinal courses, right? Are those, so are we talking about advanced undergraduates? Are we talking about underclassmen? And I'm just curious, are there any requirements from the university that a student needs to take X number of these types of courses? I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
No requirements for that. And we actually keep a list of what we call frosh-friendly Cardinal courses where a new student can do them. And I'm not going to say they don't require skills. Of course, they require skills. Everything requires skills,
Right.
but they don't require any kind of advanced education that you would not have, already had in your life.
Right. So I guess it's really about the project design in that case, because you want to have, I think it'd be really great for those introductory level students to get that exposure, but the number of projects that you can envision increases exponentially with the more courses that they've gone through.
Right.
So,
I mean, I would love to do this. We have some photography classes, as part of the art department, and we have many community members that never have an opportunity to get a portrait of their kids or, something that's important to them.
right.
I would love to have our students, that could be their project. And you don't need to be an advanced anything. You just need to be taking photography to do
Right,
that.
right. All right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious about how, kind of what the level was.
Yeah. Christine,
Especially because the classes too that you're talking about, some of them take multiple quarters. And so we're talking about longer term projects. And of course, it's a luxury that we don't have in our setting. So I've just been thinking about that. I'm sorry, Jorge,
Christina,
can you add? Yeah.
oh, no, yeah, you mentioned something that triggers something in my mind, and you asked about requirement for students to take a certain number of these courses, which they're not. However, if they do take 12 units or more of Cardinal courses, they apply to get a special notation in their transcript.
Okay, cool.
They can show that they've spent, 12 units of their time doing service work, which I
Right,
think is nice. So many students really want to have that for graduate school.
Yeah, and especially for potential future employment, that something like that could be very advantageous, of course. And then 12 units is what, roughly like talking 3 courses on average?
3 to 4.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for our panelists? Last one, Jeff, and then we'll wrap up. Go for it.
Sorry, I've been talking so much, but so I was wondering if y'all have seen any effects on enrollment in terms of, have these courses been attracting sort of a different distribution of students, right? Has this been of particular service to underrepresented minorities in STEM fields?
Actually, yes. We don't have tons of data on that, but we have enough data that at least I can say in engineering. Engineering is weird because a lot of classes you can't take unless you're an engineering major, but there are some classes, some Cardinal courses in engineering that are open to anybody. And we have many underrepresented students in those courses. So I can't, there's academic studies that show that this kind of work does attract students that are underrepresented in higher education.
That's definitely the case in healthcare courses. We have a lot of underrepresented minority students.
And same for environment. There's a real interest in students, especially that just really shaping what the topic is, right? To really focus a lot more on environmental justice, that there's a lot more, it's a huge demand. Those courses that we have are like oversubscribed, and it's students, a lot of students from underrepresented backgrounds. Even though that's something we should all be learning about, but anyway.
On that note, that's a nice note to end on, just for us to think about at Foothill, where, again, the focus on equity, the focus on service leadership, and how those two come together in real ways. And like Shoshanah said, there's definitely evidence to show, whether it's internships or these kind of practical experiences, that makes a difference for persistence and retention of students from underrepresented groups in STEM especially. So definitely more to think on. Just want to thank Esther, Shoshanah, Jorge for coming again on a Friday of a long weekend. Shoshanah, on your daughter's graduation weekend. Really, really appreciate your taking the time to share your models and ideas with us. And we might have you back because it seems like there might be some interest to ask more questions. Can we just thank everybody? And I think that should be it for today. Ram, do you have any last things you want to say? Ram is the dean of our STEM division.
I just wanted to say I was listening to everything in the background. Thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your wisdom. And yes, this was very, very illuminating. Lots of different ideas for us to work with. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Esther, Shoshana, and Jorge.
Yeah,
See you all
thank
again.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we look forward to being in, staying in touch. Please feel free to reach out.
Great. And thanks everybody for sticking it out, and for our interpreters as well. Have a great long weekend, everybody. Take care, and we shall see each other again.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. Thank you again.
Bye-bye. Bye.